My name is Aidan Moore. I'm the founding director of a company called Quantum NRG. We market ourselves as your energy problem solvers for small to medium business. That can be extended to communities, and that's why we're here this evening. I just want to take you back in time to help you understand who I am, what the drivers are for my business, because it really did start quite early in the piece. So clearly from my accent, I wasn't born in Australia. I'm a migrant from England. And that first picture there from 1979 was really the first experience I had as a young lad growing up in a rural community. So that's the thriving metropolis of Clapton in Gordana, southwest of England. Population 384. And that house there is called Grayling. Now, it didn't look like that when we bought it in 1979. It was actually more like an air raid shelter. We didn't have any hot water. We didn't have any heating. When it rained, we had buckets out, and we really had 2 rooms to live in. But my parents had a lot of vision and a big dream, and that house has become something you can see there today. But what it taught me as a young man was the benefits of being part of a rural, semi-rural community. We grew all our own veggies. We had an apple orchard, and we would trade that with a next door neighbour who had chickens and eggs. We had 2 dairies, and we would donate our time to help the dairy farmers, and we'd get milk in exchange. That type of arrangement. So very early in the piece, my sense and understanding around community was very strong, was built in those days. That second picture from 1986, in the previous year, someone knocked at our door when in the previous picture, that house was developed, and they said, "We want to buy your house." So his name was Rod Billings, fantastic human being. He said, "I'm willing to pay whatever you want for your house." And my mum, who was a district nurse, and my dad, who was a small business owner, he had news agents, said, "Sure." My mum had long held a dream of starting a nursing home. So that house in the middle is actually a school, a small school. So we bought that school, and we started with 1 patient, bottom left-hand corner, and built that into a thriving nursing home business, serving the community and treating all those residents, those patients, as family members. One thing that taught me during that period, one thing that really stands out is how hard my parents worked, how hard we all worked, and it gave me a very strong work ethic. That final picture in the corner there is me receiving the Commissioner's Commendation for Service in the RFS. It was the culmination of 10 years of delivering 2 very complex, high capex, high profile, highly stressful projects that were delivered on time and on budget with a few sacrifices. But it took a community to deliver those projects. It wasn't just me. I was the figurehead, you might say, the project manager, the program manager, and they call it project teams, but really it was a community. We built a community and we just found ways to solve problems, to get things done. Now, if I move along to Quantum NRG, Quantum NRG was established in 2022, but for me, the journey into renewables started the year prior, because around the time that we were working with Michael on his project and the 3 other farms, my wife and I decided to expend around about $60,000 of our post-tax dollars to kit the house and become self-sufficient on an energy level. So we bought 12 kilowatts of solar, put that on the roof. We bought 20 kilowatt hours of red flow batteries. And Michael's explained the reason that we went for that. It was very similar reasons to Michael. And we bought a heat pump as well. So now we use very little grid, and that's become our Quantum NRG lab. So we just try out different things. We play with different things. We've done some energy trading and a few other neat things. But that gave me the knowledge and understanding for the business that we now operate. So if now I talk about a couple of clients, sometimes I tell people what we do. It doesn't always make sense unless you hear a few examples. Let me give you a few examples. So Killarney in that top left-hand corner, that project kicked off around about August, and I received a phone call after a professional recommendation from one of our other clients. Stephen, the owner of the business, it's a lamb farm, ex-horse stud lamb farm, but it's got multiple buildings. They have multiple metering points. They have complexity around electrical infrastructure and escalating bills. And so I got a phone call and Stephen said, "I've had a few solar guys through. I just don't feel comfortable. I'm not getting my questions answered. You've been personally recommended to us. You're going to walk us through the journey and hopefully you're going to save us some money." I said, well, there's a lot to live up to, but I think we can do it. So this week, deposit was paid on a custom designed solution, and we've coordinated right through, answered all the questions that have come in between. We started out writing what we always do in our projects, which is to write a requirements brief to understand exactly what they want. We articulate it in a way that the designer understands it and can deliver against it and comment on everything in between. And suddenly Stephen is now comfortable expending CapEx to get those bills down. And then we move to the right. That's 949 Wines. Great guy. Chris Therese, like myself, he's a migrant. He's from France. Comes from a long line of winemakers. He runs this fabulous business near Lake Canobolis, where you say to him, I want a small batch of wine made. Maybe it's your company, maybe it's going to sell. Be a small batch winemaking, custom, high quality. And he had an initial solar installation 12 years ago. Again, bills were escalating, but he wanted to get to the point where he could remove himself from the grid ultimately. So he had a 2-year plan to do that. Call me, Aidan. We want to know the steps. We want to plan it out, find a way to get there to a point where we're totally energy self-sufficient. We've worked with him. We've worked with designers, got the plan in place. And again, in a couple of weeks' time, the first part of that project will be delivered. We'll be expanding his solar system. He's going to have electrification of hot water. A couple of years' time, he's going to have batteries, and there's an EV future for him as well. So these are kind of examples. We get given complex problems to solve where people have either had to go themselves or they can't quite find the right answers to their questions, and we step in and guide them through it. So Michael's giving you a taster for virtual energy networks and peer-to-peer trading. This is why I'm here this evening, because it is a new world, but it's a beneficial world. We have up there 2 different pictures of how the grid currently looks and how we think the future of the grid's going to look. In terms of the bottom picture, really what that's saying to me is that there's flexibility there. You can have someone who's generating, meeting their own needs. If there's excess there as well, they can select who they share that excess with. And the systems are in place to enable this and to make it happen. Michael, the Pecora Dairy, was one of the pilots, and he's articulated that beautifully. That pilot's been running now for 18 months. You can see some metrics there from it. There's 6 sites that are actually generating energy. There's 6 sites that are taking energy from those generation sites. There's plans for future expansion, but it was focused on an agricultural solution. And this evening, I wanted to talk to you and see if you guys are interested in doing something in the community level. We are limited by the number of retailers that support these types of solutions. Momentum Energy is a retailer tied to Tassie Hydro. That was the retailer that enabled Michael and the other farms to become part of their own virtual energy network. But since that time, others have joined. They're all using the same back-end solution. Happy to talk to you one-on-one about that, what that is and how it looks. But Energy Locals is emerging as the most flexible of the retailers. And that's simply because it supports small to medium business, which obviously is a focus for us, but also something called mass market, which is domestic or residential. There's fewer barriers with those guys. And we think that that could well be a great solution if there's an opportunity for a community virtual energy network in the Wingecarribee Shire. We've done some road testing with 3 different residents in the area. These are real rates they're very competitive. Energy Locals is what I'm trying to say. At 32 cents per kilowatt hour, that's a pretty competitive rate. And yes, the feeding's low, but of course, if you're using the community sharing, then the feeding will be of much greater value. What are the benefits of participating in a virtual energy network? Well, obviously, there has to be 2 ends to the trade. You have a generator. If a generator is not part of a sharing system, they're sending excess energy back to the grid and getting, in most cases, a standard feed-in. There are exceptions. But the off-taker is typically pulling energy from the grid if they don't have solar themselves, and they're doing that at standard usage rates. So the proposition here is, if someone generates and has excess, can they discount someone else's bill over here who may not have access to solar or renewables? And that's really the proposition. 45% of your usage rates is the available credit to both parties. I'll have to explain to you one-on-one how that figure is calculated, but just take me at face value just for now. So you can either pass the full benefit on, potentially, maybe a family member, or both ends of the trade have to agree who gets what out of that 45%. So what are we asking you to consider? When we caught up in planning this evening, I was asked what could Quantum NRG bring to the table this evening to share with the community in terms of education, but also what actions could we apply to move things forward on the sustainability level. And I suggested the VEN was the natural place to start. It doesn't require high capex. It doesn't require changing anything other than a retailer, potentially, if you're not already with that retailer. And I thought that was just a wonderful concept and something that was palatable, something digestible, and a great place to start. So it's a call for action, really, for people to express an interest. Is this something either yourselves or people that you know would be interested in? From there, it would be a case of getting your questions answered and receiving a demonstration, and then make a decision. We understand from the solution providers, and there are three, that this would be the first coordinated LGA-based energy sharing initiative, if we can pull it off. I thought that's pretty cool. There's some contact details. I've whizzed through the presentation. We're going to move to questions.